Rander's become particularly famous over the years for the generation of quite gentlemanly electric runabouts. But when it introduced the idea of an adventure boat, we got particularly excited. Now that started off as the Roma 26, that expanded through the development stages to the Roma 28. And here, finally, in Dusseldorf, we have the world launch of the Roma 29. Straight away at the back end, you see we've got extended swim platforms on both sides for easy boarding. We've got little receptacles in the deck there so that you can spec an additional ladder on the starboard side, but we do have another telescopic ladder inside this locker on the port side. That's a drained locker, incidentally. If I open that up, you'll see, so you can fit all kinds of stuff in there should you want to, particularly good for lines. But while we're back here, let's talk about the propulsive options, because that's always an interesting element of the Rand package, and it's particularly interesting here because what we have here is a 300 horsepower outboard that should be good for around about 44 knots. Now you can also spec it with a Mercury 350 horsepower inboard for about 45 knots, or a 270 horsepower diesel option for around about 40 knots. But there's also an electrical package available here. I would suggest though that it's not an option many people are going to take. If we look at this boat, look at the sector it's in, look at the way it postures, it's very masculine. It's supposed to be a proper adventure boat, so you don't really want to see it cruising along at 6 knots. And you particularly don't want to see an adventure boat that's limited to 20 or 30 miles in terms of range. So I'd suggest that every boat they sell is going to come with some form of internal combustion. And actually, their figures back that up. They say they've sold 18 and every one of them has come with a conventional power source. So let's step on board, get into that cockpit and look at the aft end here, because this is particularly interesting. Now, what we have here is the standard boat. Everything you see here is standard on this show boat, but there are loads of options. As you can see, the standard package comes with an aft bench facing forward. But if I come down here and unzip this cushion, you'll see this big steel frame. Now that is the base for a variety of modules that are designed to enable you to adapt this platform to your specific application. So instead of the bench, you can use a wet bar here with a gas barbecue. You can use a fish prep station with rod holders and tackle boxes. You can use a scuba station with an air compressor and tank holders. You can use a spearfishing module, believe it or not, with space for your guns, your spears, your buoys and your nets. You can use it as a water sports module with a wakeboard rack, or you can use it for another variety of fishing favoured by the Americans where you need to use live bait. So there really is tremendous flexibility built in there. There are also some little partitions that fold out here just to stop any backwash of seawater making its way down into that sunken cockpit. And we also got some decent storage back here. If I lift this section up, you'll see the fenders liberally littered around in there. Well, the intention here is to have a fender basket, just a dedicated net, so you can contain those properly. And then if I pop the camera down in here, you'll see that this space goes all the way under that aft bench and forward to the fuel tank. So you can access that, if I creep into the cockpit, from this deck hatch instead. And that'll really tidy up the space, make it much more practical. But if we make our way into the cockpit and have a closer look in there, you're likely to be impressed by the sense of scale. It's not a particularly beamy boat, this, but the fact they've undercut these gunnels gives you extra deck space, an extra sense of that deck space as well. And of course it means that you can mount additional gear in here, again to tailor it to your favourite application. What we have in here then, as the standard fit out, is that aft bench facing forward. We also have a bench in the centre of the deck with a handle here, because you're supposed to be able to lift it and flip it over so that that faces aft towards that aft bench. But unfortunately, on this prototype model, 3 screws have been put into this seat on both sides where it should only have been 1, so it doesn't actually rotate as it should, but it will on future models certainly. If we move back round here, you'll see that we also have a big deck hatch here. If I lift that up, you'll see what we have in there is the fuel tank and that is a 500 litre fuel tank, so that's pretty sizable for a boat of this scale. Ought to give you a very, very handy range. Let's shut that back down. And on either side of that, we have another good space. Again, it's drained, it's ideal for fenders, but apparently if you choose to go with the water sports option at this aft end, then they can also use these side sections as ballast tanks, and then you can get an additional ballast tank in the centre to really add some weight, drop the stern and kick up nice big weights for your wakeboarding. Now, spinning around, one of the key elements of this boat is of course this T-top, and it's a pretty impressive piece of work, I've got to say, built from proper steel, powder coated. If we move forward, there are well positioned grab rails, and you'll see we've got a two-part screen. If I come around here you can see it better. They kind of overlap one another so that the wind is deflected up by one and down by the other. It looks really cool, really purposeful. It looks fantastic. And if I look up again, the roof, well, that's actually made of carbon fibre, so this entire roof section, I climb up on the gunnels, you get a better sense of it. This entire roof section only weighs 15 kilos. They're keeping all the weight nice and low to improve the performance dynamics. We do have a roof rack up here though, plenty big enough I would suggest for a few bits and bobs, maybe even a couple of proper sea kayaks. That's an important part of the adventure boat package. And if we look forward again, you'll see, well, here in the forward section, just butting up against the helm seats there, is a fold-out table, which sits nicely beneath the shelter of that T-top. I should mention, while I'm looking at it actually, we've got some netting up there so you can fit additional bulky items up there, just to keep them out of harm's way. And there's additional storage under here. But let's fold this back into place and make our way round to the helm station, because this is quite an interesting spot too. Now, as an adventure boat, excuse me, let's just get that bolster out of the way. As an adventure boat, these aren't the seats that it's going to come with eventually. It's going to come with a pair of offshore seats, both of which will be suspension equipped to give you a bit of extra comfort in rough seas. They'll also go up and down on these units. They'll go forward and aft so you can get yourself a comfortable position. And they'll also spin so that you can face aft towards that central bench and enjoy a bit of lunch under the shelter of that T-top. And turning to the dash itself, well, we've got a couple of 9 inches here, 9-inch MFDs. There's space here for a pair of 12 inches, no problem at all. There's our bow thruster, throttle on the right-hand side, and the wheel here. It's kind of rigged, it seems to me, for a good aggressive standing position. I quite like that on a boat like this. Got additional netting down below, plus 2 foot braces, so you can really make yourself comfortable in the seated or standing position. It really is quite pared back, but that's what you want from this kind of boat. And if I move into the position and look forward, well, the views are pretty fantastic, but because it finishes a decent way forward, there's no obstacle to reaching that side deck, and it still feels like a proper open boat. It's a very engaging helm position. Now let's move up a little step onto the side deck and move forward, because things are quite impressive up here too. Now, first up, we got a little step through bow there. The anchor, as you would expect, is mounted there on the stem, which means we can get away with a nice compact locker there. If I move this cushion out of the way, you'll see that we got an additional bit of fender storage, which is quite nicely placed just behind the chain locker, and there's access to the chain locker should you need it. Just put that cushion back down and move aft again. If I lift up these cushions, you'll see that in addition to a hinge at the forward edge, which is of course to lift up this section for storage, there's a hinge at the back end as well, and the principle there, if I put that back, is that you can take this section and fold it out, and it'll just nestle on this moulded lip on the front of that console and give you a nice big bow lounger. But what I really like about this section of the boat, and what I suspect most of the show visitors are really enjoying, is this. Now, we have a loo in here, but the way it opens is really impressive. The fact that that mechanism opens up such a massive aperture makes it really easy to get in here. It's a much better space than you expect on a boat of this size. And actually the volume is increased because they've used every element of the space right down into the whole bottom, so any water that drains through this drain hole only has a couple of centimetres in the bottom of the hole before you're basically hitting seawater. So they've really done a great job to maximise space. As you would hope, the toilet comes as part of the standard package, but to be honest, what I really love about this area of the boat, particularly on a boat of this scale, is the sheer volume of it. There's easily enough space to pack all your gear in here and go away camping for a week at a time. There's still a bit of tidying up to be done in terms of the fit and finish and in terms of the ergonomics, but already you can see that this platform has the capacity to command much broader appeal than almost any other boat in the existing RAN fleet.